the how to do writing instructions. So let's go ahead and walk that through. I want to look at a couple notes I put together for how to do writing because it is a skill that is kind of the base logic to how we do video instructions. Now we all know video instructions will help us uh, follow a couple cues, but I want to go ahead and make sure we also look at the baseline, which is also looking at uh, how to write them overall. All right, so we'll walk this through how to write overall actions, how to design layout and wording, and a little bit of that. We've got about most of these are pretty quick, so we'll run the table quickly as such. All right, so all the steps in the process, walk away for a period of time, return and check for thoroughness, and group related steps under headings. The hardest move is to make sure you've got the right steps grouped. And we're going to look at that in detail in a moment. You've got to make sure people feel like the steps are logically demarcated from each other, so the next step makes sense. Like, okay, I completed that, and it was one complete action, and it made sense in sequence. So an example is, preparing the equipment, using the equipment. So obviously two different moves there, cleaning up the equipment. Um, the big question I will always say when you're doing written instructions is if we can get a photo in there that's clear or a diagram. Often diagrams are much simpler because they're reduced and they're easier to see. Use it. There you go, showing more powerful than telling. And let's get into the wording. So well, first layout, numbered lists, right? Each action, each step, block the related elements, make sure there's white space. Short and sweet, we'll talk more about that because it sounds great, but how do you do it? Place the most important information first. Use the active voice and imperative mood. Imperative mood is a directing mood. So you're giving commands and you're often beginning with a verb. So place the item, place is a direct command. Stop the engine. There you go. We're not doing this full explanatory sentence. The operator should then stop the engine. No, stop the engine. So instructions are the one area of, professional writing where we can act as dictators. Go do this. There you go. All right, now we're getting into the DNA. So we're going to highlight keywords using caps or bold. And often it's the critical word in the phrase. So press the return key. So we're going to go ahead and punch that word return by putting it in caps. Number the steps again. Put blank lines between the steps. Give one action per step. That's all common sense. But again, I'm laying it out twice because it's so important. And here's the big one that's hard. And we'll look at an example here just coming up in the next slide. Within steps, distinguish actions from supporting action. And that needs to be explained. Let's talk about that. So the actions before the responses. The bad example, press the return key. So we do have indicative that we've got to do the action. All right. The customer's order screen will appear. Let's kind of talk that out. You can also use layout to make such distinctions. All right, sounds like that might not be a problem, but let's look at this one. Press the return key, and this is all one action, right? So we're grouping it. Just notice that, right? And notice it separates out. So press the return key and the order screen will appear is an action with a response. And then the alternative is a separate step because that's a whole different way to do it. And that's the logic going on here. Hang in here because this is really important. I'll go over it one more time. Action, press the return key, bold and return in caps. What will happen? Oh, response, the customer order screen will appear. That's one unit. Now, if there's a separate action that can get you the same place, that's technically a separate step. So there you go. Step 5, you can also use layout to make such distinctions. All right, let's look at, you can give the step and explain it. Enter analyze. This command prompts the computer to perform 7 analytical computations. I often see instructions written this way. It's the most common. It's more old school. Notice the second sentence gives a little bit of breathing room. It sounds like you're talking to a real human, not just somebody that's, a computer that's punching out commands. And that way it can be a little more relaxing for the person, right? Enter, analyze. Oh, okay, but I did that. And then you get this sense of assurance. This command prompts the computer to do this. A little bit of why, a little bit of, okay, that's why I'm doing this. All right. A little, again, technical terms, but using participles, not nouns, to describe the task. So we use installing rather than installation. Installation is what's called a nominalization. It's when we take a noun and we try to make it a verb. Installing is just a better way to kind of work. That is that. We're not going to talk about cultural diversity. That's for another day, another dollar. Let's just look at one more thing here up online. I want to sort of hit this one more time with y'all. Checklist: use short sentences, short paragraphs, arrange your points in logical order, statement specific, imperative, mood again, direction. Put the most important item in the sentence at the beginning. Say one thing in each sentence. I did like the way that they did that here. One item, one action, one point, right? Choosing your words carefully, no jargon. The examples and analogies should be sparse. I often like to footnote them, or I like to, think of them as possibilities for landmines, because if you get into any metaphors or analogies, people can get sidetracked. That's not what they're in for with instructions. They want boldness, they want crisp definition, and anything else could throw them off. We don't want digression. All right, this one, 10, sounds almost funny, right? Don't omit steps or take shortcuts. This is where you need to do what's called a usability analysis, because you're not going to catch it necessarily. And so all good technical communication departments will have usability. Well, they'll take the instructions and they'll run them through with somebody and watch how they do it. Literally watch how people do it. So testing to evaluate the accuracy. And if you looked and read chapter 27, you got this. So you invite people to follow the directions, you observe them very, very closely. And then you ask them and you have a post-op chat where you talk with the test group about problems they've encountered. And usually you've got to do this in a couple different ways too. You have to do it by age, you do it by gender, you do it also by background, if the person has any competency at all in technical areas. And it's hard to screen for those variables when you survey and get usability folk in. And it also depends on the company, whether they invest or not. Some companies say, meh, engineers said it was good, it's spec'd out, it's up to the customer to kind of work with it. Good companies will work that very, very hard. They'll do the front end work, if you will, to make sure those things are there. One other thing I just want to underscore, it's really important. There's a couple things that were missed in chapter 27, or maybe not emphasized as much. I can't emphasize enough graphics that if we can replace it with a pic or supplement with a drawing, great. Safety should be in the front end of the instructions. And we didn't talk about what's called front matter and back matter when I talked, because I was just talking about the writing of the instructions themselves. But again, the front matter should sell the product. Congratulations, you bought such and such. Do not miss the opportunity to give people a sense that they have ownership of a product worthy. That's a really smart move for a company. It develops ethos just like Apple. Apple wants to give you a product, whether we like them or not, right? They don't know how to sell it. You're in with the in crowd because you got the AirPods. All right, so that's what they do. And that's, it's even the way the box comes, right? All that has a feel. Same fonts that they use in all their materials. That's pretty smart. When we get an IKEA product, we know we're going to get the pics, we can get the IKEA look. So all that's part of it too. Safety information, again, is up front with caveats. Oftentimes there's also an allusion in the introduction to, not allusion, excuse me, a statement as to where to find the troubleshooting information. And then the last thing that's not really alluded to in 27, the conclusion, that each step should be very crystal clear that leads to a response, and that's a complete unit. That's a unit. In other words, that's complete. Good, done. The only other thing that wasn't well covered that I didn't get out into as much in this bit is to sometimes give people fair warning that something goes wrong. If A doesn't happen, then, go onward to step 5. If A does happen, skip step 5. Those kind of things are important. So sometimes you can have people skip steps if they, go a certain way. And then also troubleshoots. If you have a problem, please go to page 4 with troubleshooting information. So, all right. I do recommend, this wasn't a bad read. If you guys want it at some point, you can just Google it, how to use English grammar for writing instructions. It's kind of funny. What I like is that there's some post outs from it. So there's some really good links. I would say it's kind of brief. Yeah, and I guess I'm sorry, I did forget to say this too. The second person point of view, you, your, yours. All right. Generally speaking, you avoid that because most commands are just direct. So they're not even needing to use second person as much. All right, cool. And let me go ahead and stop that.